The apartment on Maple Street wasn't much to look at, but it was theirs. Evan Parker turned his key in the lock with hands that still smelled of wood stain and sawdust, his shoulders aching from 12 hours of installing cabinets for Mrs. Chen down on Fifth Avenue. The hallway was dim, the overhead bulb had burned out 3 weeks ago, and he kept meaning to replace it, but $20 light bulbs had to wait when $20 meant dinner for 3 days. "Daddy!" Lila's voice rang out from behind the thin apartment door before he could even get it fully open. She was 8 years old with blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets older than her years. Today she wore a dress that used to be her mother's when Sarah was small, hemmed up with safety pins because Evan hadn't figured out how to work Sarah's old sewing machine yet. "Hey, little bird," he said, scooping her up despite the protest in his back. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." She smelled like crayons and the strawberry shampoo they'd bought with last week's grocery money. "What did you do today?" "I made you something," she said, wiggling down from his arms. The apartment was small enough that 3 steps took her to the kitchen table, where she'd set up what looked like an entire art studio. Construction paper, broken crayons, a bottle of glue with the cap missing, and scissors that had seen better days were scattered across the surface. Evan looked at her creation and felt something shift in his chest. It was a drawing of the two of them, holding hands in front of what might have been their apartment building, or maybe a castle, he couldn't tell. But what stopped him was the words she'd written across the top in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. "Daddy and me are rich in love." "Lila," he said quietly, sitting down in the chair beside her, "where did you learn that?" She shrugged, picking up a red crayon and adding something to the picture. "Mrs. Helen next door said it yesterday when I was sitting on the steps. She said some people have money in their pockets and some people have love in their hearts, and love makes you richer than anything else." Evan smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hurt a little around the edges. Mrs. Helen was 73 and had been watching out for them since Sarah died 2 years ago. She had a way of saying exactly what Lila needed to hear, even when Evan couldn't find the words himself. "Are we poor, Daddy?" Lila asked, not looking up from her drawing. The question hit him like a punch to the stomach. He'd been dreading it for months, watching her notice things. The way he counted coins before they went to the grocery store, the way he'd started buying generic cereal, the way he'd quietly returned the bike he'd put on layaway for her birthday last month. "We don't have as much money as some people do," he said carefully. "But we have love," she said, still coloring, "and Mrs. Helen says that's what matters most." "Mrs. Helen is right," he said, and meant it. But as he looked around their small apartment, at the couch with the broken spring, at the window with the crack they'd covered with tape, at the refrigerator that hummed too loud and kept their milk just this side of sour, he wondered if love was enough. If love could pay for school supplies and doctor visits and all the things Lila needed that he couldn't give her. That night, after Lila had fallen asleep in the bed they shared because the apartment only had 1 bedroom, Evan sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. The numbers never seemed to add up right. Rent, utilities, groceries, gas for his 10-year-old truck that he used to get to jobs around town. It all came to more than what he made, no matter how he arranged the figures. His phone buzzed. A text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Parker, this is Naomi Griffith. I got your number from Tom Rodriguez. He said you do handyman work. I have a large house that needs organizing and some repairs. The job would be several weeks of work. Please call me if interested. Pay is $25 per hour." Evan stared at the message. $25 an hour was more than he'd made in years. Tom Rodriguez was a contractor who'd hired him for a few small jobs, good man. But this felt too good to be true. He looked toward the bedroom where Lila was sleeping, her small form barely making a dent in the mattress. She deserved so much more than this. She deserved a room of her own, toys that weren't from yard sales, clothes that fit properly. She deserved a father who wasn't constantly worried about money, who could say yes when she asked for something special. Maybe love was enough, but maybe, just maybe, love deserved a fighting chance. He typed back, "Miss Griffith, I'm very interested. When can we meet?" The response came within minutes. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., 1247 Lakeshore Drive." Lakeshore Drive. Evan had driven past those houses before. The kind of places that look like they belonged in magazines, with gates and circular driveways and lawns that were greener than anything he'd ever seen. The kind of places where people like him only went to work. He looked at Lila's drawing again, still spread across the table. Two stick figures holding hands, surrounded by hearts and flowers and the careful words of a child who understood something about love that most adults had forgotten. Tomorrow he would step into a world he'd never belonged to. But tonight, in the small apartment that smelled like crayons and strawberry shampoo, he was exactly where he needed to be. The house at 1247 Lakeshore Drive wasn't just big, it was the kind of big that made Evan's truck look like a toy in the circular driveway. 3 stories of white stone and glass, with columns that stretched up to a roof that seemed to touch the low-hanging clouds. Manicured hedges lined walkways that curved around fountains and flower beds that probably cost more to maintain than Evan made in a month. He sat in his truck for a full minute, engine ticking as it cooled, wondering if he'd made a mistake. His work clothes, clean but faded jeans and a flannel shirt with a small tear at the elbow, suddenly felt like a costume he wasn't qualified to wear. Through the tall windows, he could see crystal chandeliers hanging in rooms bigger than his entire apartment. The front door opened before he could knock. The woman who answered was younger than he'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but probably wasn't. She wore a cream-colored sweater that looked soft enough to be made of clouds, and pants that had never seen a washing machine. Everything about her seemed expensive, from her perfectly straight posture to the way she held her hand on the doorframe. "Mr. Parker?" Her voice was crisp, professional, not unfriendly, but not warm either. "I'm Naomi Griffith." "Yes, ma'am." He wiped his palm on his jeans before extending it. Her handshake was brief, businesslike. "Come in." She stepped aside, and Evan found himself in a foyer that was bigger than his kitchen and living room combined. The floor was marble, real marble, not the laminate kind, and his work boots echoed despite his effort to walk quietly. "I inherited this house 6 months ago," Naomi said, leading him through rooms that seemed to stretch on forever. "My aunt had particular tastes. I need someone to help me organize, decide what stays and what goes. There are also some repair issues. Nothing major, but things that need attention." They walked past a dining room with a table that could seat 20, past a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, past sitting rooms and parlors and spaces Evan didn't even have names for. Everything was beautiful in the way that expensive things were beautiful, but there was something cold about it too, like a museum where people weren't supposed to actually live. "This is the main area I need organized," Naomi said, opening double doors to reveal what might have been a ballroom. Boxes were stacked everywhere, furniture covered with sheets, paintings leaning against walls. "My aunt collected things. Art, antiques, books, most of it valuable, some of it," she gestured vaguely, less so. Evan walked into the room, taking in the scope of the work. It would take weeks, maybe months, to sort through everything properly. "What's your timeline?" "No rush. I want it done right." She crossed her arms, watching him examine the boxes. "Tom Rodriguez spoke highly of your work. He said you're honest, reliable." "I try to be." "The job pays $25 an hour, as I mentioned. You'd work Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day. I assume that's acceptable?" "Acceptable?" It was more money than Evan had seen in one place in years, but something in her tone made him feel like he should be grateful, like she was doing him a favor rather than hiring him for work she needed done. "Yes, ma'am, that works." "Good." She walked to a desk in the corner and pulled out a folder. "I'll need you to sign some paperwork. Non-disclosure agreements, liability waivers, standard things." Evan took the papers, trying not to show how many of the words he didn't understand. He'd dropped out of college when Sarah got pregnant with Lila, had been working with his hands ever since. Legal language might as well have been written in a foreign language. "You can take those home, look them over," Naomi said, noticing his hesitation. "Bring them back tomorrow when you start." "Tomorrow? Is that too soon?" No, it's fine." He folded the papers carefully. I have a daughter, she's 8. During the summer, she usually comes with me to work sites, as long as it's safe. Would that be?" "A child," Naomi's voice sharpened slightly. "In the house?" "She's very well behaved. She mostly just reads or draws, doesn't get into anything. The words came out faster than he meant them to, the familiar panic of a single father trying to make childcare work with an unpredictable schedule. Naomi was quiet for a long moment, and Evan could see her weighing something in her mind. I suppose it would be all right, as long as she doesn't disturb anything valuable. She won't, I promise. Fine. She walked toward the front door, clearly ending their meeting, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. As Evan drove home, he found himself thinking about the house, about the way sound seemed to disappear into all that space. He thought about Naomi Griffith, about how she'd stood in that ballroom surrounded by a lifetime of expensive things, and looked like the loneliest person he'd ever seen. That evening, he told Lila about the job over dinner, mac and cheese from a box, but he'd added some frozen peas to make it healthier. Is she nice? Lila asked, twirling noodles around her fork. She seems professional. What does that mean? Evan considered this. It means she's polite, but not warm, like she keeps people at a distance. Lila nodded solemnly, like she has walls around her heart? Sometimes his daughter's insights took his breath away. Yeah, little bird, maybe like that. Well, Lila said, taking another bite, maybe she just needs someone to show her how to take the walls down. Evan reached across the table and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Maybe she does. The mansion felt different with Lila in it. Maybe it was the way she skipped beside Evan as they walked through the front door, her light-up sneakers squeaking against the marble floor. Or maybe it was how she looked up at the crystal chandelier in the foyer and whispered, "Wow, it's like a fairy tale castle." Naomi appeared in the archway leading to the main hall, dressed in another expensive sweater, this one the color of pale lavender, and those same perfect pants that probably cost more than Evan's rent. Her eyes went immediately to Lila, and Evan caught something flash across her face. Surprise, maybe, or something else he couldn't name. "This must be your daughter," Naomi said, her voice carrying that same professional tone from yesterday. Lila stepped forward with the fearless confidence that 8-year-olds possessed, extending her small hand the way Evan had taught her. "I'm Lila Parker. Thank you for letting me come to your house. It's very beautiful." Naomi looked down at the offered hand for a moment before taking it. "Thank you, and you're welcome." "I brought books and my art supplies," Lila continued, hoisting her backpack higher on her shoulders. "Daddy says I have to be very careful around your pretty things and not touch anything unless I ask first." "That would be appreciated." Evan watched the exchange, noting how Naomi seemed uncertain around Lila, like she wasn't sure what the appropriate response should be. It occurred to him that maybe she didn't spend much time around children. "Come on, little bird," he said. "Let's get you set up somewhere quiet while I start working." They made their way to the ballroom, where the towers of boxes seemed even more intimidating in the morning light streaming through tall windows. Evan found a spot near the windows where Lila could spread out her things, a small blanket from home, 3 books from the library, and a tackle box full of art supplies they'd collected over the years from yard sales and dollar stores. "Remember the rules?" Evan asked as he helped her arrange her space. "Stay in my spot unless I need the bathroom. Don't touch anything that looks expensive. If I need something, ask you first, not the lady." Lila recited the list they'd gone over that morning. And use my inside voice, even though the house is big enough for outside voices." "Good girl," he kissed the top of her head. "I'll be right over there sorting through those boxes." For the first hour, everything went smoothly. Lila read her library book, Something About a Girl and a Dragon, while Evan began the methodical process of cataloging the contents of each box. Naomi appeared periodically, checking on his progress, offering brief answers to his questions about what should be kept and what could be donated. It was during one of these check-ins that Lila looked up from her book. "Excuse me, Miss Naomi," she said, using the polite address Evan had coached her on. Naomi turned, clearly not expecting to be addressed directly. "Yes? Could I ask you something?" Naomi glanced at Evan, who nodded encouragingly. "I suppose." Lila closed her book and stood up, walking over to where Naomi stood near a stack of covered furniture. "Are you lonely in this big house all by yourself?" The question hung in the air like something fragile. Evan froze, a box of books halfway lifted, watching Naomi's face cycle through several expressions. Surprise, discomfort, something that might have been sadness. That's not really," Naomi started, then stopped. "I just wondered," Lila continued in that matter-of-fact way children had of discussing complicated things, Because when Daddy and I lived in our old apartment before this one, it was really small, but it never felt lonely because we had each other. But this house is so big, and it's just you, and big empty spaces can make you feel small sometimes. Naomi was staring at Lila now, and Evan could see something shift in her expression. Not softening exactly, but like she was seeing something she hadn't noticed before. Sometimes big houses can feel quiet, Naomi said finally. Lila nodded sagely. That's what I thought. She looked around the ballroom, taking in all the covered furniture and stacked boxes. All these things must have belonged to someone who loved them once. But now they're just sitting here covered up like they're waiting for someone to love them again. Lila, Evan said gently, worried she was overstepping. But Naomi held up a hand. No, she's right. My aunt collected all of this over 60 years. She loved beautiful things. Did you love her? Lila asked. Yes. She was difficult sometimes, but yes. Lila walked closer to Naomi, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look up at her. Then maybe the things aren't waiting for someone new to love them. Maybe they're waiting for someone who loved her to take care of them. Naomi knelt down suddenly, bringing herself to Lila's eye level. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The wealthy woman in her expensive clothes and the 8-year-old in her yard sale dress and light-up sneakers. That's a very wise way to think about it, Naomi said softly. Lila smiled, the kind of smile that could light up rooms. Then she leaned in close, cupping her hand beside Naomi's ear like she was sharing a secret. Daddy, she whispered, just loud enough for Evan to hear, show the rich lady how poor people love. Naomi went very still. Lila pulled back, still smiling, and skipped back to her blanket and her book like nothing momentous had happened. But something had changed in the room. Evan could feel it in the way the light seemed different, in the way Naomi remained kneeling on the marble floor long after Lila had returned to her reading corner. When she finally stood, she looked at Evan with an expression he couldn't read. Confusion, curiosity, and something deeper that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised him. I should let you get back to work, she said, but her voice was different now, quieter, less certain. After she left, Evan walked over to Lila. Little bird, what did you mean by that? What you whispered to Miss Naomi? Lila looked up from her book, her expression innocent and knowing at the same time. I don't know, Daddy. It just felt like something she needed to hear. For the rest of the morning, Evan found himself thinking about those words. Show the rich lady how poor people love. What did that mean? And why did it feel like his 8-year-old daughter had just changed something fundamental in this house full of beautiful, quiet things? When Naomi returned an hour later with a glass of lemonade for Lila and a cup of coffee for him, the first personal gesture she'd made since they'd started working together, he thought maybe he was beginning to understand. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon while Evan was cataloging a collection of first-edition books that probably cost more than his truck. Naomi appeared in the doorway of the ballroom, but instead of her usual quick check-in, she lingered, watching Lila, who was sprawled on her blanket drawing what appeared to be a family of elephants. Mr. Parker? Naomi said, and there was something different in her voice, less formal maybe. I was wondering if you and Lila would join me for dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, just, I thought it might be nice. Evan looked up from the leather-bound volume in his hands, surprised. In the 3 weeks they'd been working together, Naomi had been polite, professional, and distant. She paid him well, respected his work, and had even started bringing Lila small treats, expensive cookies from a bakery downtown, fancy juice boxes that Lila treasured like they were made of gold. But dinner? That was personal. That's very kind of you, he said carefully, but we wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be imposing, I'm asking. Naomi's eyes drifted to Lila again. The dining room seats 20 people, and I eat alone in it every night. It would be nice to have company. Lila looked up from her drawing, her face brightening. Could we, Daddy? I've never eaten dinner in a castle before. It's not a castle, little bird. Close enough, Lila said with 8-year-old logic. That evening, Evan found himself sitting at one end of the massive dining table while Naomi sat at the other, with Lila positioned between them like a small ambassador bridging 2 different worlds. The meal was simple. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, bread that tasted like it had been made that afternoon. But it was served on china so delicate, Evan was afraid to breathe on it. "This is really good," Lila said, cutting her chicken into precise small pieces the way Evan had taught her. "Did you make it yourself?" "I have someone who comes in to cook," Naomi said. "Mrs. Patterson. She's been with the family for 30 years. 30 years is a really long time," Lila observed. "She must love you a lot to stay that long." Naomi paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "I suppose I never thought of it that way. She's just always been here." "That's what love looks like sometimes," Lila said matter-of-factly. "Staying. Even when things are hard or different or when people change. Daddy stayed with me when Mommy went to heaven, even though it made him really sad and he had to work lots of jobs to take care of me." Evan felt heat creep up his neck. "Lila, Miss Naomi doesn't need to hear about." "No, it's all right," Naomi said, setting down her fork. "What happened to your mother, Lila?" "She got sick when I was little. Daddy says she loved me very much, but sometimes people get too sick to stay, even when they want to." Lila's voice carried the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who had been told a difficult truth with love and honesty. "But Daddy stayed, and that's how I know he loves me more than anything in the whole world." Naomi was looking at Evan now, and he saw something in her expression he hadn't seen before. Not pity. He would have recognized that immediately and resented it. Something else. Understanding, maybe, or respect. "That must have been very difficult," she said quietly. "It was," Evan admitted. She was everything. When she died, I didn't know how to be a single father. I didn't know how to braid hair or pick out dresses or explain why some kids at school had more things than we did. "But you figured it out," Naomi said. "I'm still figuring it out, every day." He looked at Lila, who was now building a small tower out of her dinner rolls. "But the love part, that was never hard. That was just there." "Just there," Naomi repeated like she was testing the words. "Like breathing," Lila added helpfully. "You don't have to think about breathing, you just do it. That's how Daddy loves me." After dinner, Naomi showed them through parts of the house Evan hadn't seen yet. A conservatory filled with plants that must have cost a fortune to maintain. A sitting room with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. A music room with a grand piano that gleamed black and silver under crystal chandeliers. "Do you play?" Evan asked, running his fingers lightly over the keys. "I used to. My aunt insisted on lessons." Naomi's voice carried an odd note. "I wasn't very good at it." "I bet you were better than you think," Lila said, climbing onto the piano bench. "Could you play something now?" "Oh, I don't think." "Please?" Lila's eyes were wide with hope. "I've never heard a real piano before, just the electric one at school." Naomi hesitated, then sat beside Lila on the bench. Her fingers found the keys hesitantly, and after a moment, a simple melody filled the room. It was beautiful. Not perfect, but heartfelt. Lila watched in fascination, and when Naomi finished, she clapped with genuine enthusiasm. "That was wonderful! Right, Daddy?" "It was beautiful," Evan said, and meant it. Naomi's cheeks flushed slightly. "I'm out of practice." "Music is like love," Lila said, swinging her legs from the bench. "Even when you're out of practice, it's still there inside you, waiting for the right time to come out." On the drive home, Lila chattered about the evening, the fancy food, the beautiful rooms, the piano music, but as Evan tucked her into bed, she grew quiet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Daddy," she said, "I think Miss Naomi is sad." "What makes you say that?" "She has all those pretty things, but when she looks at them, she doesn't smile. And her house is so quiet. When we're home, even when we're not talking, it doesn't feel quiet like that. It feels full." "Full of what?" "Love," Lila said simply. "Her house feels empty, even with all the pretty stuff in it." Evan kissed her forehead. Maybe that's why she invited us to dinner. Maybe she wanted to know what it feels like when a house is full. "Do you think we helped?" "I think," Evan said carefully, "that you helped her remember something she might have forgotten." "What?" "That the most beautiful things aren't the ones you can buy." The call came at 6 in the morning on a Thursday, jolting Evan from sleep. His phone buzzed against the nightstand, and he grabbed it quickly, hoping it wouldn't wake Lila. "Mr. Parker?" Naomi's voice was different, strained, smaller somehow. I'm sorry to call so early, but I won't be able to. That is, would it be possible for you to take the day off today? Evan sat up, instantly alert. In the 5 weeks they'd been working together, Naomi had never missed a day, never changed the schedule. She was precise, controlled, predictable. This wasn't like her. Of course, he said. Is everything all right? A long pause. There's been a family situation. I need to handle some things. Naomi, he said, using her first name without thinking. Are you okay? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know. Something in her voice made his chest tighten. Do you need anything? Someone to talk to? I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Her voice broke slightly. My brother called last night. There are some business problems with the family company. Legal issues. Things I thought were settled when my aunt died. I might lose everything. Evan was quiet for a moment, processing this. Where are you now? At the house. In the library. I've been here all night, going through papers, trying to understand. She trailed off. Have you eaten anything? I don't think so. I'm coming over. You don't need to. Naomi, I'm coming over. An hour later, Evan stood at the front door of the mansion with a thermos of coffee and a bag containing 2 peanut butter sandwiches and an apple, the best he could manage from their sparse kitchen. Mrs. Helen from next door was watching Lila, delighted to have company for her morning stories. Naomi answered the door still wearing yesterday's clothes, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked smaller than he'd ever seen her, fragile in a way that made him want to wrap her in one of Lila's blankets. You came, she said, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Of course I came. He followed her to the library, where papers were scattered across every surface. Legal documents, financial statements, letters from attorneys, all evidence of a life suddenly turned upside down. My brother wants to sell his shares in the company to pay his gambling debts, Naomi said, sitting heavily in a leather chair that dwarfed her. But there are complications with the trust. Issues with my aunt's will. The lawyers are saying I might have to sell the house, liquidate everything, just to cover the legal fees and keep the business from going under. Evan poured coffee from his thermos into one of the fine china cups scattered around the room. He handed it to her, noting how her hands shook slightly as she took it. I know this probably sounds ridiculous to you, she continued. Rich woman losing her money, having to face the real world, I know how it must sound. It doesn't sound ridiculous, Evan said quietly. It sounds terrifying. She looked up at him, surprised. When Sarah died, he said, settling into the chair across from her, I thought I might lose Lila, not because I didn't love her, but because I wasn't sure I could provide for her alone. I was a teacher making $30,000 a year, and suddenly I was facing medical bills, funeral costs, childcare expenses I'd never had to think about before. I was so scared that someone would decide I wasn't enough, that she deserved better than what I could give her. But you didn't lose her. No, but I understood what it felt like to have your whole world hanging by a thread. To feel like everything that mattered could disappear because of things outside your control. Naomi was quiet for a long time, sipping the coffee. I don't know how to be poor, she said finally. I don't know how to live without all of this. I've never had to work for money, never had to worry about paying bills or buying groceries. I don't even know how much things cost. You're stronger than you think you are. How can you possibly know that? Evan thought about this. Because you invited a stranger and his daughter to dinner. Because you learned to play piano even though you said you weren't good at it. Because you called me this morning when you were scared instead of facing it alone. Those aren't signs of strength. They're signs of someone who knows how to reach for connection when things get hard. That's not easy for people who've been taught to handle everything alone. Naomi set down her cup, and for a moment Evan thought she might cry. But instead, she straightened her shoulders, and he saw a flash of the steel that had helped her family build their fortune in the first place. What would you do, she asked, if you were me? I'd figure out what really matters, what I'd fight for and what I could let go. He looked around the library, at the leather-bound books and priceless artwork. And I'd remember that the most important things can't be sold or stolen or lost in a lawsuit. Like what? Like the fact that Mrs. Patterson has stayed with your family for 30 years. Like the way your face lit up when Lila clapped for your piano playing. Like whatever made you decide to hire a broke handyman and let his daughter eat cookies in your ballroom. Naomi was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. When did you become so wise? When I realized that loving someone means more than being able to buy them things. That afternoon, they worked together going through the legal documents, organizing them into piles. Urgent, important can wait. Evan couldn't understand most of the legal language, but he could read a spreadsheet, could help her make sense of the numbers that would determine her future. As the sun set through the library windows, Naomi looked up from a stack of papers. "Thank you," she said, "for coming today, for treating this like it mattered." It does matter. Your fear matters, your pain matters, you matter. Something shifted in her face then, a wall coming down. I don't think anyone has ever said that to me before. Then they weren't paying attention. That night, Evan tucked Lila into bed and told her about his day, about how sometimes even rich people needed friends when things got scary. "Did you help her feel better?" Lila asked. "I think so. A little." "Good. Because that's what love does. It helps people feel better when they're scared." "Is that right?" "Uh-huh. And Daddy? I think Miss Naomi is learning how to love. She just needed someone to show her how." The fever came on a Saturday night, swift and merciless. Lila went to bed complaining of a headache and woke up at midnight burning with heat, her small body shaking with chills. Evan spent the night in a chair beside their bed, changing cool washcloths and monitoring her temperature, watching the numbers climb higher than they should ever go. By morning she was delirious, calling for her mother in a voice that broke his heart. The emergency room doctor was kind but firm. Bacterial infection, serious but treatable with antibiotics and rest. 3 days minimum in the hospital for observation. Evan called Naomi from the hospital corridor, his hands shaking as he dialed. Her legal crisis had been resolved the week before, not easily and not without cost, but she would keep the house and most of her inheritance. Things had been different between them since that day in the library, warmer somehow, more real. "She's gonna be okay," he said when Naomi answered, needing to lead with that. "But she's in the hospital, and I won't be able to work for a few days." "Don't even think about work right now," Naomi said immediately. "What do you need? How can I help?" "I don't need anything. I just wanted to let you know." "Evan," her voice was firm, "what do you need?" The question hit him harder than it should have. He was so used to managing everything alone, to being the one who provided and protected and solved problems. The idea that someone might want to help, might be able to help, was almost foreign. "I need to stay with her," he said finally. "The doctors say she'll be fine, but she's scared, and she keeps asking for me. I can't leave her alone here." "Of course you can't. I'm coming to the hospital." "Naomi, you don't have to." "I'll be there in 20 minutes." She arrived with flowers for Lila and coffee for Evan, and something else he hadn't expected. Mrs. Patterson, carrying a bag that smelled like homemade soup. "Miss Naomi told me the little one was sick," Mrs. Patterson said in her gentle voice. "Hospital food isn't fit for healing." Lila was awake when they entered the room, pale but alert, her eyes brightening when she saw Naomi. "You came to visit me?" "Of course I did." Naomi sat carefully on the edge of the hospital bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The medicine makes me sleepy, but Daddy says that's good because sleep helps you get better faster." Lila looked at the flowers. "Are those for me?" "They are. Pink roses, because they reminded me of the dress you wore to dinner that night." "They're beautiful. Daddy, aren't they beautiful?" Evan nodded, but he was watching Naomi's face, seeing something there he hadn't seen before. Fear. Real, raw fear. Like the thought of Lila being sick had genuinely frightened her. Later, when Lila had fallen asleep and Mrs. Patterson had gone home, Naomi pulled Evan into the hallway. "I want to pay for this," she said without preamble. "The hospital bills, the medication, whatever it costs." "No." "Evan." "No thank you, but no." Her face flushed. "This is ridiculous. You can't afford this kind of expense, and I can. Let me help." "It's not about the money." "Then what is it about?" Evan looked through the window into Lila's room, where she slept surrounded by machines that beeped softly, monitoring her recovery. It's about being her father. It's about taking care of her myself. Even if it means going into debt, even if it means struggling for months to pay it off. Even then. Naomi stared at him. I don't understand. I know you don't. He turned to face her fully. You grew up believing that money could solve any problem, fix any situation. But some things can't be bought. Some things have to be earned. Like what? Like the right to be the person who takes care of someone you love. Like the knowledge that you've done everything you could with what you had. Like being able to look your daughter in the eye and know that you fought for her with your own strength. That's pride talking. Maybe, but it's also love. The kind of love that says, I will move mountains for you, even if I have to move them one stone at a time with my bare hands. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. The day in the library, when you helped me with the legal papers, was that love too? Yes, but you didn't solve my problems for me. You didn't try to give me money or fix everything. Because that's not what you needed. You needed someone to sit with you while you figured it out yourself. You needed someone to believe you were strong enough to handle it. And that's what you need now? Someone to believe you're strong enough? I need someone to understand that being strong enough means doing it myself, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That night, Evan slept in the chair beside Lila's bed, waking every few hours to check on her. Around 3 in the morning, he felt someone drape a blanket over his shoulders. He looked up to see Naomi settling into the other chair with a book and a cup of coffee from the vending machine. What are you doing here? He whispered. Sitting with you while you take care of her, she said simply. You said some things can't be bought, but some things can be shared. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. That's what people do for each other, isn't it? They show up, they stay. On Monday morning, when the doctor said Lila was well enough to go home, Evan carried her to his truck while Naomi walked beside them, carrying the flowers and the small stuffed elephant the nurses had given Lila as a get-well gift. Will you come visit me at home? Lila asked Naomi as Evan buckled her into her car seat. If you'd like me to. I would. And Daddy would too, even though he's too proud to ask. Naomi looked at Evan over Lila's head, and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or a recognition of something that had been building for weeks without either of them quite realizing it. Then I'll come, Naomi said, but I should warn you, I've never been to an apartment before. I might not know the rules. Lila giggled. The rules are easy. Take off your shoes if they're muddy, don't be too loud because Mrs. Helen next door is taking a nap, and always say please and thank you. I think I can manage that. As they drove home, Lila fell asleep in the back seat, and Evan found himself thinking about what Naomi had said in the hospital. You said some things can't be bought, but some things can be shared. Maybe that was the difference between charity and love. Charity was something you gave to someone who needed it. Love was something you shared with someone who mattered. And somewhere along the way, without quite realizing when or how, Naomi Griffith had begun to matter. The house hunting began innocently enough. Naomi appeared at Evan's apartment on a Tuesday evening, her face flushed with excitement, clutching a folder of real estate listings. I've been thinking, she said as Lila let her in, about your living situation. This apartment is so small, and with winter coming, and Lila needing more space to grow. Evan looked up from the kitchen table, where he'd been helping Lila with her homework, a knot forming in his stomach. What kind of thinking? I want to buy you a house. The words tumbled out of Naomi like she'd been holding them back for days. Something with a yard for Lila, proper bedrooms, maybe even room for a piano. I've found several perfect options, all in good school districts. The silence that followed was deafening. Lila looked between them, her pencil frozen over her math worksheet, sensing tension she didn't understand. Naomi, Evan said carefully, that's incredibly generous, but… It's not generosity, she interrupted, spreading the listings across the table. It's practical. You're working for me. You've become important to me. Both of you. I can afford this easily, and you need better housing. It makes perfect sense. Evan stared at the photographs of houses that might as well have been palaces, compared to their cramped apartment. Colonial-style homes with wraparound porches, two-story houses with bay windows and attached garages, places where Lila could have her own room, her own space to grow. places that represented everything he'd ever wanted to give her and couldn't. "Look at this one," Naomi continued, pointing to a particularly beautiful house with white picket fencing. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, finished basement. The mortgage would be less than what you're paying in rent here. "Because you'd be paying the mortgage," Evan said quietly. "What difference does that make?" "The result is the same. Lila has a safe, comfortable place to grow up." Lila slid off her chair and moved to look at the pictures. "It's like the houses in my books," she said softly. "The ones where families live happily ever after." The wonder in her voice was like a knife in Evan's chest. He could see her imagining herself in these spaces, could practically hear her dreams taking root. "The thing is," Naomi pressed on, encouraged by Lila's reaction, "I've already spoken to the realtor about this one. We could see it tomorrow, maybe put in an offer by the weekend." "No." The word came out sharper than Evan intended. Naomi and Lila both looked at him in surprise. "No," he repeated, more gently this time. "Thank you, but no." "I don't understand." Naomi's voice carried genuine confusion. "This would solve so many problems. Lila would have stability, space, a good school district. You wouldn't have to worry about rent or maintenance or being a man who provides for his daughter." Evan stood up, needing distance from the pictures that represented everything he couldn't give Lila himself. "You don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" "This." He gestured around their small apartment. The second-hand furniture, the crack in the window they'd covered with tape, the cramped space that somehow held all their love. "This isn't a problem to be solved. This is our life. Our home. The place where Lila learned to walk, where we read bedtime stories, where we've built every memory that matters." "But you could build better memories in a better place." "Better according to who?" Evan's voice rose slightly, and he caught himself, glancing at Lila. "According to your standards? According to what money can buy?" Naomi's face flushed. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it? You see this apartment, and you see poverty, something to be fixed. I see the place where my daughter feels safe and loved. You see a problem that money can solve. I see a life that we've built together with our own hands." "Daddy," Lila said quietly, "maybe Miss Naomi just wants to help." "I know she does, little bird, but sometimes the way people want to help isn't the help we need." Naomi was staring at him, her face cycling through emotions. Hurt, confusion, frustration. "So what is it you need? Because I've been trying to understand, trying to learn from you both, and every time I think I've figured it out, you push me away. I need you to understand that my worth as a father isn't measured by the size of house I can provide. I need you to see that love isn't about giving someone the best of everything. It's about making the best of what you have." "But why choose struggle when you don't have to?" Evan looked at her for a long moment, seeing in her face the fundamental divide between their worlds. "Because the struggle is part of the love. Because working 3 jobs to keep a roof over Lila's head means something that someone else paying for a mansion doesn't. Because when she's older and looks back on her childhood, I want her to remember that her father moved heaven and earth for her, not that some rich woman wrote a check." Tears gathered in Naomi's eyes. "I'm not trying to replace you. I'm not trying to take away from what you've built. I just want to give you both something better." "This is better," Lila said suddenly, her small voice cutting through the tension. Both adults turned to look at her. "This apartment with Daddy is better than the biggest house without him working for it. Because when Daddy fixes our leaky faucet, I know he did it because he loves me. And when he saves up money to buy me new shoes, I know every dollar was hard, and that makes them more special than if someone just bought them easy." Naomi sat down heavily in one of their mismatched chairs. "I don't know how to help without money," she said quietly. "It's the only way I've ever known how to solve problems or show care." "Then learn a new way," Evan said, his voice gentler now. "Sit with us while we eat mac and cheese for dinner. Listen to Lila read her library books. Help her with homework. Be present for the small moments instead of trying to buy bigger ones." "What if I can't? What if I don't know how?" "Then we'll teach you," Lila said simply. "The same way you taught me about pretty music and fancy manners. People can learn new kinds of love if they want to." That night, after Naomi had left with her folder of real estate listings, Evan tucked Lila into their shared bed. She was quieter than usual, and he could see her processing the evening's events. "Daddy," she said finally, Were you mean to Miss Naomi? The question hit him harder than he'd expected. I don't think I was mean, but I might have hurt her feelings. She really wanted to help us. I know she did. But you don't want her help? Evan considered how to explain this to an 8-year-old. It's not that I don't want her help, it's that I want her to understand what kind of help means something to us. Money can buy a house, but it can't buy the feeling of home. She can write a check for anything we need, but that doesn't create the same bond as when we work together to get what we need. Like when we saved up for my bike. Exactly. Remember how long it took? How we put coins in that jar every week? And how excited I was when we finally had enough. Right. If Miss Naomi had just bought you a bike the first day you wanted one, would it have felt the same? Lila shook her head. No, because the best part wasn't getting the bike. The best part was working for it together, and knowing you wanted me to have it so much that you gave up other things to save the money. That's the difference between charity and love, little bird. Charity gives you what you need. Love gives you what you need in a way that makes you stronger. Do you think Miss Naomi understands now? I think she's learning, but it's hard for someone who's always had money to understand what it means to live without it. Just like it would be hard for us to understand what it's like to have so much money that you forget how special it is when something costs you something. Maybe we can help her understand better. Maybe we can. But as Evan lay awake that night, listening to Lila's steady breathing beside him, he wondered if he'd been too harsh. Naomi's offer had come from genuine care, even if it missed the mark. Maybe there was a way to bridge their different worlds without sacrificing what mattered most to him. Maybe love was big enough to encompass both their perspectives. Maybe, but first she had to understand that some things were worth more than money, even when money could make them easier. The apology came the next morning in the form of a knock on Evan's apartment door at 7 a.m. He opened it to find Naomi standing in the hallway, but she looked different. Gone were the expensive clothes and perfect composure. Instead, she wore jeans. Actual jeans, not the designer kind, and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that looked more functional than fashionable. I brought coffee, she said, holding up a cardboard carrier with 3 cups. And donuts, the kind from the gas station, not the fancy bakery. Evan stared at her, taking in this new version of the woman he'd known for months. Naomi? I've been thinking all night about what you said, about learning a new way. She looked nervous, uncertain in a way he'd never seen before. Could you teach me how to help without trying to fix everything with money? Lila appeared beside Evan, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Miss Naomi, are those chocolate donuts? They are, and glazed. And something called old-fashioned that I've never tried before. You've never had an old-fashioned donut? Lila's eyes widened in amazement. They're the best kind. Come in, come in. Daddy, can Miss Naomi have breakfast with us? And just like that, Naomi Griffith found herself sitting at their tiny kitchen table, drinking gas station coffee from a mismatched mug, while Lila explained the relative merits of different donut varieties. Evan watched from the counter where he was making scrambled eggs, noting how Naomi listened to Lila's chatter with genuine attention, how she asked questions that showed she was really hearing what his daughter said. The thing about old-fashioned donuts, Lila was saying seriously, is that they're not trying to be fancy, they're just trying to be good, like really good at being exactly what they are. I see, Naomi said, taking a careful bite. Oh, that is really good. Right? Sometimes the best things are the simple things. Evan caught Naomi's eye over Lila's head and saw understanding there, the beginning of real comprehension about what they'd been trying to tell her. After breakfast, Naomi surprised them both. I was wondering, she said carefully, if you might need help with anything today. Not money, she added quickly, seeing Evan's expression. Just presents, time, an extra pair of hands. Evan hesitated. It was Saturday, their usual day for errands and chores, the unglamorous business of keeping their life running on a tight budget. We're not doing anything exciting. Laundromat, grocery shopping, library. Could I come? I've never done any of those things before, real grocery shopping, I mean, or a public laundromat. Lila bounced in her chair. Yes, Daddy, can she? I can show her how we sort the clothes and how to find the best cereal deals. So Naomi Griffith spent her Saturday learning how ordinary people lived. At the laundromat, she watched in fascination as Evan taught her to sort lights from darks, how to measure detergent, how to find machines that weren't broken. She listened while Lila explained their system. Wash on Saturday mornings when it was less crowded. Bring books to read while they waited. Save quarters in a special jar all week. It's actually quite peaceful, Naomi said as they sat waiting for the wash cycle to finish, Lila curled between them reading a library book about dragons. I never expected that. What did you expect? Evan asked. I don't know. Something grim, I suppose. Drudgery. But this feels domestic, comfortable. It's about the company you keep, Lila said without looking up from her book. Everything's nicer when you're with people you love. At the grocery store, Naomi watched Evan compare prices with the intensity of a general planning a battle campaign. She saw him choose the store brand over name brand, saw him calculate cost per ounce in his head, saw him put back the good coffee in favor of the cheaper kind. How do you keep track of it all? She asked as he compared pasta prices. Practice, Evan said. When every dollar matters, you learn to make every dollar work as hard as possible. Can I try? He handed her 2 boxes of cereal, one name brand, one generic. Tell me which is the better deal. Naomi studied the boxes with intense concentration, trying to calculate price per ounce the way she'd seen him do. This one? She said finally, holding up the generic brand. That's right. Why? Because it's 40 cents less for the same amount of cereal, and Lila said it tastes almost the same as the expensive kind. Exactly. Sometimes the difference between name brand and generic is just packaging and advertising. At the library, Naomi watched Lila navigate the children's section like she owned it, greeting the librarian by name, carefully selecting her 3 allowed books for the week. Only 3? Naomi asked. That's the rule for kids' cards, Lila explained, but it's okay because Daddy reads them to me, and then we talk about them and that makes them last longer. Plus, I can always come back next week for more. What if you really wanted a book you couldn't get from the library? Then I'd save up for it, Lila said matter-of-factly, like I'm doing for the book about horses I saw at the bookstore. I'm putting 50 cents in my book jar every week, and by Christmas I'll have enough. Naomi was quiet for a moment. What if someone just bought it for you? Then it wouldn't be mine the same way. When you save for something yourself, it's more special because you know exactly how much you wanted it. That afternoon, they returned to the apartment to put away groceries and fold laundry. Naomi insisted on helping, though her folding technique left much to be desired. You're terrible at this, Lila giggled, watching Naomi struggle with a fitted sheet. I've never folded laundry before, Naomi admitted. I've had people who did that for me. Well, now you know, Evan said, another life skill to add to your repertoire. As they worked, Naomi found herself paying attention to things she'd never noticed before. The way Evan and Lila moved around each other in the small space with practiced efficiency, the way they had systems for everything, where clean dishes went, how towels were folded, which corner of the living room was Lila's special reading spot. The way their small space felt full of life and warmth in a way her mansion never had. I think I'm beginning to understand, she said as they finished putting the last of the groceries away. Understand what? Evan asked. What you meant about making the best of what you have. This isn't about the size of the space or how much money you spend, it's about the life you build inside it. Exactly, Lila said. Our apartment is small, but it's full of love. Your house is big, but it was empty before you started spending time with us. Naomi sat down heavily in one of their mismatched chairs. I've been approaching this all wrong, haven't I? Trying to solve problems instead of sharing experiences. Not wrong, Evan said gently. Just different. You're used to being able to fix things by throwing money at them. But some things can't be fixed that way because they're not actually broken. Your life isn't broken, Naomi said slowly, like she was working through a difficult equation. It's just different from what I know. And that doesn't make it less valuable, Lila added. Different can be good, different can be beautiful. That evening, as Naomi prepared to leave, she lingered at the door. Thank you, she said, for today, for letting me see how you really live. Thank you for wanting to learn, Evan replied. Could I come back next Saturday? Help with errands again? Do you want to? I want to learn how to be useful in ways that don't involve writing checks. I want to understand what it means to work for something, to make every dollar count, to find joy in simple things. Then yes, Lila said before Evan could answer. You can come back. But next time I'm teaching you how to fold fitted sheets properly. After Naomi left, Evan and Lila settled on the couch for their Saturday night tradition of watching a movie from the library's DVD collection. "I think she's really learning," Lila said, curled against Evan's side. "I think you're right. Do you think she'll keep coming? Even when she gets good at poor people things?" Evan considered this. "I think she'll keep coming because she's discovered something she didn't know she was missing." "What?" "Family," Evan said. "Real connection, the kind that doesn't have anything to do with money. Is that what we are to her? Family? I think we might be becoming that, yes." "Good," Lila said decisively. "Because I like her better when she's learning to be regular people than when she was trying to be fancy all the time." "Me too, little bird, me too." The crisis came on a Tuesday in October, swift and unexpected as autumn storms. Evan's phone rang while he was sorting through another box of Naomi's aunt's belongings, her collection of antique jewelry this time, each piece worth more than he made in a month. "Mr. Parker?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "This is Janet Coleman from Riverside Elementary. I'm afraid there's been an incident with Lila." Evan's blood turned to ice. "What kind of incident? Is she hurt?" "She's not injured, but she's very upset. There was an altercation with another student. She's in the principal's office now, and we need you to come in immediately." Evan found Lila sitting in a chair outside Principal Morrison's office, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her favorite dress torn at the shoulder. She looked up when she saw him, and the relief in her eyes nearly broke his heart. "Daddy," she whispered, launching herself into his arms. "I'm here, little bird. What happened?" Principal Morrison, a kind woman in her 50s, gestured them into her office. "I'm afraid Lila got into a physical altercation with Marcus Webb during recess. From what the playground monitors tell me, Marcus was saying some rather cruel things about your financial situation, and Lila responded by pushing him down." Evan's jaw tightened. "What kind of things?" "Apparently he called her welfare trash and said she smelled like poor people." Morrison's voice carried genuine sympathy. "I want you to know that this kind of language is absolutely unacceptable, and Marcus will be facing consequences for his words." "But I pushed him," Lila said quietly. "I know we're not supposed to push people, but he kept saying mean things about you, Daddy. He said you were too stupid to get a real job, and that's why we live in a tiny apartment." Evan closed his eyes, feeling the familiar ache of wanting to protect his daughter from a world that could be needlessly cruel. "What did you say to him?" "I told him that having less money doesn't make someone worth less. I told him my daddy is the smartest, kindest, hardest working person in the world, and that I'd rather be poor with him than rich with someone mean like Marcus." Lila's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "And then he laughed and said poor people always say stuff like that to make themselves feel better, and that's when I pushed him." Morrison leaned forward. "Lila, while I understand you were defending your father, physical violence is never acceptable at school. I have to suspend you for the rest of the day." Evan nodded. "I understand, and Lila will apologize to Marcus." "I will not," Lila said firmly. "I'm sorry I pushed him because pushing is wrong, but I'm not sorry for standing up for you." "Lila." "No, Daddy. Some things are worth getting in trouble for." An hour later, they sat in their apartment while Lila changed out of her torn dress. Evan had called Naomi to explain why he wouldn't be returning to work that day, and she'd arrived within minutes, bringing ice cream and a fierce expression. "That little boy needs to learn some manners," Naomi said, pacing their small living room, "and his parents need to learn some basic human decency. Who teaches a child to say things like that?" "It's not the first time," Evan said quietly. "Kids pick up on more than we think they do. They hear their parents talking about people like us, and they repeat it. But to say those things to a little girl—" "Welcome to the reality of being poor in America," Evan said with more bitterness than he usually allowed himself. "It's not just about not having money. It's about being treated like you're worth less as a person because of it." Lila emerged from the bedroom in clean clothes, overhearing the conversation. "But we know that's not true," she said matter-of-factly. "We know our worth doesn't come from our bank account." "You know that," Naomi said. "But how do you deal with other people who don't?" "We remember who we are," Lila said, settling between Evan and Naomi on the couch. "We remember that love makes us rich in ways that matter. And we feel sorry for people like Marcus because they don't understand that yet." "Feel sorry for him?" Naomi asked. "After what he said to you?" "Miss Naomi, think about it. Marcus has lots of money, right? His family has a big house and fancy cars and expensive clothes. but he's still so unhappy that he has to be mean to other kids to feel good about himself. That's really sad. Evan looked at his daughter with amazement. "Where does she get this wisdom?" he murmured. "From you," Naomi said softly. "From watching how you handle difficulties with grace and dignity. From learning that how you treat people matters more than what you can give them." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about bullies and kindness, about standing up for yourself without losing your compassion for others. Naomi listened as Evan helped Lila process her feelings, marveling at how he turned a painful experience into a teaching moment about character and values. Later, while Lila was reading in her corner, Naomi pulled Evan aside. "I want to do something," she said. "Not about Marcus, that's not my place. But I want to do something for Lila, something that honors who she is and what she stood up for today." "Naomi?" "Not money," she said quickly. "Not things. Something else. What did you have in mind?" "I want to write her a letter, about courage, about standing up for what's right, about how proud I am to know her. And I want to put it in a frame so she can remember, when she's older and facing other bullies, that there are people who see her worth." Evan considered this. That would mean a lot to her. "And to you? It would mean something to you too?" "Yes, because it's not about solving a problem or fixing a situation. It's about recognizing who she is and celebrating that." "I'm learning," Naomi said with a small smile. "Slowly, but I'm learning." That evening, as Evan tucked Lila into bed, she was quieter than usual. "Are you okay, little bird? Today was hard." "I'm okay. But Daddy, do you ever wish we had more money so people wouldn't say mean things about us?" Evan lay down beside her, pulling her close. "Sometimes I wish we had more money so you could have things you want, but I wouldn't change who we are to get it. Our struggles have made us stronger, kinder, more grateful for what we have. If we were rich like Marcus's family, we might never have learned those things. And we wouldn't have met Miss Naomi the same way." "What do you mean?" "She hired you because she needed help organizing her house, but really she needed help organizing her heart. If we were already rich, we couldn't have taught her about love that doesn't cost money." "So you think everything happened the way it was supposed to?" "I think sometimes people come into our lives to learn from us, and sometimes we come into their lives to learn from them. And sometimes, if we're really lucky, both things happen at the same time." "Is that what's happening with Miss Naomi?" "I think so. She's learning how to love from us, and we're learning that we're worth loving from her. Not because of what we have or don't have, but because of who we are." "When did you get so wise?" "From watching you, Daddy. You taught me that love is the only thing that really makes someone rich. Everything else is just stuff." As Lila drifted off to sleep, Evan thought about the day, the cruelty of childhood, the strength of his daughter, the steadfast support of the woman who had somehow become essential to their lives. Tomorrow there would be other challenges. Other moments when their poverty would make them targets for judgment or cruelty. But tonight, in their small apartment filled with love and laughter, and the security of belonging to each other, they were the richest people he knew. Christmas morning came softly to the apartment on Maple Street, arriving not with fanfare but with the gentle light filtering through their taped window and the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in their temperamental oven. Lila woke before dawn, as children do on Christmas, but instead of rushing to presents, she padded quietly to the kitchen where Evan was already making coffee. "Merry Christmas, Daddy," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Merry Christmas, little bird." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Ready to see what Santa brought?" Under their small tree, a Charlie Brown special from the lot's clearance section. 3 carefully wrapped presents waited alongside the single gift Lila had made for Evan, a painting of their apartment with hearts floating around it like confetti. It wasn't much by most standards, but it was everything by theirs. The knock on the door came just as they were settling down to open presents. Evan opened it to find Naomi standing in the hallway, but this version of her would have been unrecognizable to the woman who had first hired him 9 months ago. She wore the jeans and sweater that had become her uniform for weekend visits, her hair in a simple ponytail, her arms full of packages wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, though her face glowed with excitement. "I brought some things, but they're not. Well, you'll see." "Miss Naomi," Lila squealed, running to hug her. "You came for Christmas morning." "I was hoping I could spend it with my favorite people," Naomi said, and the simple declaration made Evan's chest tight with emotion. They settled around the tree together, and Naomi's gifts revealed the depth of her transformation. For Lila, she'd made a coupon book filled with promises. Good for one piano lesson. Good for one afternoon of baking cookies. Good for one trip to the art museum. Good for one sleepover at my house. Each coupon was handwritten and illustrated with simple drawings that showed she'd been practicing. "You made these yourself?" Lila said in wonder, flipping through the pages. "I wanted to give you experiences we could share, not just things you could have," Naomi explained. Is that the right kind of gift?" "It's perfect," Lila said, throwing her arms around Naomi's neck. "These are promises, and promises are the best gifts, because they mean someone wants to spend time with you." For Evan, Naomi had assembled what she called a handy dad survival kit, a collection of small tools and supplies he'd mentioned needing over the months, along with a thermos to replace his cracked one and work gloves that actually fit his hands. Practical gifts, chosen with care and attention to what would actually improve his daily life. "How did you remember all these little things?" he asked, genuinely amazed. "I've been listening," she said simply. "Really listening. For the first time in my life, probably." But Lila's gift to Naomi was the one that stopped time in their small living room. It was a drawing, carefully colored and mounted on cardboard that Evan had helped her cut. The picture showed 3 figures, a tall man, a smaller woman, and a little girl standing in front of a house. But it wasn't the mansion on Lakeshore Drive, or even one of the houses from the real estate listings. It was their apartment building, drawn with loving detail down to the crack in the front step and Mrs. Helen's flower boxes. At the bottom, in Lila's careful handwriting, were the words, "My family." Naomi stared at the drawing for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears. "Lila," she whispered, "do you really see me as family?" "Of course," Lila said matter-of-factly. "Family isn't just people who have the same last name. Family is people who choose to love each other every day, even when it's hard. Family is people who show up." "And you show up," Evan added quietly, "every Saturday for laundry. Every time Lila has a school play or a doctor's appointment. When she was sick, when I was worried, when we needed someone to just sit with us while we figured things out." Naomi wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, not caring about smudged makeup for probably the first time in her adult life. "I never knew what family felt like before. I had relatives, people who shared my DNA and my trust fund, but I never had people who chose me for who I am rather than what I could give them." "Well, now you do," Lila said, settling between them on the couch like she belonged there, which, Evan realized, she did. They all did. Later, as they shared Christmas dinner at their small table, a feast of pot roast and mashed potatoes that Naomi had helped Evan prepare, learning to cook in their tiny kitchen with the same determination she'd once applied to hostile takeovers, Lila looked around the table with satisfaction. "This is what I meant," she said suddenly. "What do you mean, little bird?" Evan asked. "That day when I whispered to Miss Naomi about showing her how poor people love. This is what I meant." She gestured around their cramped apartment, at the mismatched dishes and secondhand furniture, at the 3 of them crowded around a table meant for 2. "Poor people love with time instead of money. We love with presence instead of presents. We love with attention instead of stuff." Naomi nodded slowly. "You mean love that costs everything you have to give, even when what you have seems like nothing to other people." "Exactly. Rich people, old rich people like you used to be, they love with their wallets. They think love means buying the biggest, most expensive thing. But poor people love with their hearts and their hands and their time, because that's what we have to give." "And that kind of love," Evan added, looking at Naomi with something deeper than gratitude, "that kind of love is worth more than any house or car or bank account." "Because," Lila continued, warming to her theme, "when someone loves you with their time, you know they really chose you. Time is the one thing nobody can get more of, so when someone gives you their time, they're giving you part of their life." Naomi was quiet for a moment, processing this. "So when you rejected my offer to buy you a house, I was trying to preserve the thing that mattered most," Evan said. "The knowledge that everything Lila and I have together, we built ourselves. That our love for each other isn't dependent on anyone else's generosity." "But now," Lila said, "you're not trying to buy our love anymore. You're giving us your time and your attention and your presence. You're learning our kind of love." "And what kind is that?" The kind that makes you richer no matter how much money you have, Lila said with the confidence of someone who had lived it. The kind that grows bigger when you share it instead of smaller. The kind that doesn't care about bank accounts or credit scores or what neighborhood you live in. As the afternoon stretched into evening, they sat together in their small living room, Lila reading aloud from one of her new library books while Evan and Naomi listened. The space felt full in a way that had nothing to do with the furniture or decorations, full of contentment and belonging and the simple miracle of chosen family. "Thank you," Naomi said quietly when Lila had fallen asleep between them, her head on Naomi's lap and her feet tucked under Evan's arm. "For what?" "For teaching me the difference between charity and love. For showing me that the most valuable things can't be bought. For letting me learn how to be part of something real." "Thank you for being willing to learn," Evan replied. "For becoming the kind of person who chooses love over convenience. Who shows up even when it's messy and complicated. For becoming family," Lila murmured sleepily, not quite awake but aware enough to add her voice to theirs. Outside their windows, snow began to fall on the modest neighborhood where they'd built something extraordinary from the simplest materials. Time, attention, presence, and the revolutionary idea that love was not something you could purchase, but something you could only practice. In the morning, there would be new challenges. Bills to pay, work to do, the ongoing reality of living with less money than the world seemed to think was enough. But tonight, in their small apartment filled with laughter and warmth, and the security of belonging to each other, they were exactly where they needed to be. Rich in all the ways that mattered, rich in love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.